I understand. Take my hand, please.
I can't. Not now.
Yes, you can. We can get through this together.
Okay.
The wedding was supposed to be the grandest that the little town of Willow Creek had ever witnessed. But as the church bells tolled 3 o'clock, the bride sat alone on the cold stone steps with rain plastering her veil to her tear-streaked cheeks. She had been jilted at the altar by a wealthy mine owner's son who had declared, in front of the entire congregation, that a girl of her low station was not fit to carry his name. Her name was Lorna Whitfield, and she had no family left to turn to, for her father had died in the mines and her mother had followed him just a year later from a broken heart. The townsfolk passed by with averted eyes, their pity laced with the cruel satisfaction of those who had secretly predicted this very outcome all along. It was then that a tall, broad-shouldered man with sun-bronzed skin and quiet eyes stepped out from the livery stable across the street, his hat pulled low against the downpour. Before you discover what happened next when this lonesome rancher offered her shelter, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story from Weston Taylor's Official. Elias McCall was a cattle rancher who lived on a remote spread high in the Bitterroots, a man who spoke more to his horses than to people and had a reputation for being solid as the mountains themselves. He had come into town that day for supplies, but when he saw the young woman in the soaked wedding gown, something tugged at his heart that he couldn't simply ignore. He crossed the muddy street with measured steps, stopping a respectful distance away, and asked in a voice like gravel wrapped in velvet, "Do you have anywhere to go?" Lorna looked up at him, her eyes red and vacant, and she simply shook her head, unable to form words through the shame and the cold that had seeped into her very bones. Elias extended his hand, rough and calloused from years of hard work, and said with a gentleness that seemed to wrap around her like a warm blanket, "Now you do." Something in his steady gaze made her believe that this stranger was not offering pity, but a genuine, unadorned refuge, and after a long moment, she placed her trembling fingers in his palm. He wrapped his heavy oilskin coat around her shoulders and lifted her onto his horse as if she weighed no more than a sack of grain, then swung up behind her with effortless grace. The ride out of Willow Creek was silent, except for the drumming of the rain on the leaves, but Lorna felt an unfamiliar sense of safety in the broad wall of his chest at her back. Elias's ranch was a sturdy log cabin nestled in a high meadow with a view of the peaks that seemed to touch heaven, and a warm light already glowed in the window from the fire he had left banked that morning. He helped her down and led her inside, where the smell of dried herbs and leather mingled with the sweet scent of pine logs crackling in the hearth. Lorna stood shivering in the doorway, dripping onto the braided rug, and whispered, "I don't have any money, and I can't pay you. I have nothing left at all." Elias simply pulled a chair close to the fire and said, "I didn't ask for payment, and a person's worth isn't measured by what they've lost, only by what they're willing to rebuild." He showed her to a small but clean room that had once belonged to his late mother, with a patchwork quilt on the bed and a window that framed the entire mountain range like a painting. That night, Lorna sat by the fire wrapped in the quilt, while Elias cooked a simple stew, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel the desperate, gnawing loneliness that had been her constant companion. Over the following days, she insisted on helping with the chores, despite Elias's gentle protests that she should rest and recover her strength after everything she had endured. She scrubbed the floors until they shone, learned to make his favorite biscuits from the sourdough starter he had kept alive for a decade, and even helped feed the orphan foal he was nursing in the barn. Elias, in turn, taught her how to ride properly, how to read the weather from the clouds, and the names of all the wildflowers that bloomed in the high pastures. Their conversations started haltingly, but soon they would sit on the porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing until the stars came out. Lorna told him about her father, a proud Cornish miner who had always dreamed of giving her a better life, and how his death had left her vulnerable to the whims of the town. Elias shared the story of his own parents, how his father had built this ranch with bare hands, and how his mother had died young from a fever that swept through the valley. A quiet bond began to grow between them, like the roots of the ancient pines outside, invisible on the surface, but anchoring them deeper with each passing day. One afternoon, while they were mending a fence in the east pasture, Lorna cut her hand on a rusty wire, and Elias immediately tore a strip from his own shirt to bandage it. As his fingers brushed her palm, a spark of something electric passed between them, and their eyes met with an intensity that made them both look away, cheeks flushing with sudden warmth. That night, Lorna lay awake staring at the ceiling, realizing that the fluttering in her chest was not gratitude alone, but something far deeper and more terrifying, because it required hope. Elias, lying in his bedroll by the fire as he insisted on doing until she was comfortable, stared into the flames and admitted to himself that his heart had already begun to beat for her. The idyllic peace was shattered one morning when a fancy buggy rolled up the mountain trail, carrying none other than the man who had jilted Lorna at the altar, Arthur Hawley. Arthur had heard rumors that his discarded bride was living with a rancher, and his pride was wounded not by love, but by the idea that she had found any semblance of happiness without him. He stepped down from the buggy in a tailored suit, his thin mustache twitching with arrogance, and demanded that Lorna return with him to Willow Creek, where he might still consider a lesser arrangement for her. Elias stepped between them, his massive frame blocking the doorway like a fortress wall, and said calmly, "She isn't going anywhere with you, and you'll leave this mountain now." Arthur laughed, a cold and brittle sound, and replied that Elias was nothing but a dirt-poor rancher who couldn't possibly stand against the Hawley family's money and influence. Lorna, however, stepped out from behind Elias and faced her former fiancé with a spine of steel she hadn't known she possessed, her voice ringing clear and unwavering. "I would rather live in a barn and eat nothing but wild berries with a man who respects me than spend one night in your mansion as your purchased property," she declared. Arthur's face contorted with rage, and he made the mistake of grabbing her arm to force her toward the buggy, his grip bruising her skin with the same careless cruelty he had always shown. Elias moved faster than a man his size should be able, and in an instant, he had Arthur pinned against the buggy with one forearm pressed firmly across his chest, not hurting him but holding him helpless. "The lady has spoken," Elias rumbled, his voice dropping to a dangerous low that made Arthur's blood run cold. "And if I ever see your face on this mountain again, you'll learn what a dirt-poor rancher can do." Arthur, trembling and white as milk, scrambled into his buggy and whipped the horses into a panicked gallop, disappearing down the trail in a cloud of dust and cowardice. As the sound of hoofbeats faded, Lorna turned to Elias with tears streaming down her face, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that she had finally stood up for herself. She threw her arms around his neck and held him tightly, whispering, "You gave me a home, but you also gave me back my voice, and I will never be able to thank you enough." Elias, with his heart pounding against his ribs, wrapped his arms around her and breathed in the scent of her hair, feeling more whole than he had in all his years on the mountain. That evening, they sat on the porch in a silence that was no longer uncertain but filled with the soft, unspoken knowledge that everything between them had changed irrevocably. As the alpenglow painted the peaks pink and gold, Elias reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm, and she didn't pull away. He asked her, in a voice thick with emotion, if she could ever consider staying on the mountain, not as a guest, but as the mistress of the ranch, as his wife. Lorna laughed through her tears, a sound of pure, unbridled joy, and answered that she had already considered the ranch her home since the moment he said, "Now you do." The next Sunday, they rode down to Willow Creek together, and Lorna walked into the same church where she had been humiliated, with her head held high and her hand firmly clasped in Elias's. The townsfolk stared, some with admiration and others with shame, but Lorna didn't care, because she was no longer the jilted bride, but a woman who had found her true worth. The preacher, who had been forced to perform the original ceremony that never was, gladly agreed to marry them right then and there, with the whole congregation as witnesses. Lorna wore a simple white dress that the preacher's wife had kept in a cedar chest, and Elias had polished his boots and trimmed his hair, looking every inch the proud bridegroom. When they exchanged vows, Elias's voice was steady and sure, promising to love, honor, and protect her all the days of his life, and Lorna's voice echoed with equal conviction. After the ceremony, the town put together a makeshift wedding feast in the churchyard, with pies and roasts and a fiddle player who struck up a lively tune. Even those who had once scorned Lorna now raised their glasses in genuine celebration, because the transformation of her happiness was too profound to deny. The newlyweds rode back up the mountain as husband and wife, the sunset blazing behind them, and Elias told her that the cabin had never truly felt like a home until she filled it with her laughter. Lorna replied that home wasn't a place made of logs and nails, but the safety she felt in his arms, a shelter that no storm could ever breach. In the years that followed, the ranch flourished, and Lorna became renowned for her skill with healing herbs, often riding down to treat sick children and ailing elders. Elias's reputation as the strong, silent rancher who had stood up to the Hales earned him the respect of every family in the valley, and he was eventually elected as the town's justice of the peace. They had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, who grew up wild and free on the mountain, learning the value of kindness and the strength that comes from standing up for what is right. Lorna never forgot the day she sat on the church steps in the rain, and she made it her mission to help other young women who were cast aside by a world that often valued wealth over worth. Whenever a lost soul found their way to the ranch, Elias would greet them with the same quiet question, "Do you have anywhere to go?" And Lorna would answer with the open door. Their love story became a legend in Willow Creek, told around fireplaces and in the saloon for generations, a testament to the truth that the best homes are built on the ruins of the most painful goodbyes. If this tale of hope, courage, and the healing power of a simple act of kindness has stirred your heart, then you are right where you belong with the Western Tales official family. We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below, because every story we tell is enriched by the voices of the viewers who gather around this digital campfire. Give this video a hearty like if you believe that everyone deserves a second chance at love, and subscribe so you never miss another legendary Western tale. Until next time, keep your hearts open to the unexpected, for you never know when a simple question on a rainy day might change your life forever. Remember that home isn't always the place you were born, but the place where someone sees your pain and says, without hesitation, "Now you do." Ride on, partner, and may the stories you hear tonight fill your dreams with the rugged beauty of the West and the promise of redemption.